Well, we all know what the media think about helping our children change their sex and trying to be transgender. For the past decade, they've promoted the whole issue. In fact, back in 2014, the New Zealand Herald actually let me post this article expressing concern for the trend. But of course, I got rubbished for it. But I guess you give credit to the New Zealand Herald that they actually allowed this viewpoint. And then we also published 2 reports warning of the consequences: boy, girl, other, and children transitioning. Australian paediatrician Dr. John Whitehall. But a lot of water has gone under the bridge and we have seen the consequences. And the research is now coming out backing up what we said. But what do the general public think? Well, we've just commissioned a nationwide poll on this through a reputable and independent company. And of course, there's been significant coverage of the results by the media. Here's a summary of that. Yeah, okay, so they've completely ignored it. So let me tell you about the polling and then please share this video. So this new poll has found strong support for a ban on puberty blockers and also support for a ban on the use of gender affirmation, chemical and surgical treatment for under 18s. Polled 1,000 New Zealanders. It was commissioned by Family First and surveyed by Courier Market Research. And respondents were asked a number of questions around gender ideology and the treatment of children who experience gender confusion. So let's go through the results. Respondents were asked: the UK Health Service, the NHS, has stopped the use of puberty blockers, which begin the gender transition process for children under 16, as it's deemed they're too young to consent. Do you support or oppose a similar ban in New Zealand on the use of puberty blockers for young people 16 or younger? Almost 2 out of 3, 62% respondents support banning puberty blockers for children aged 16 or younger. You'll see there just 19% opposed. A further 19% were unsure or refused to say. Now, opposition to puberty blockers has grown since December 2020. You'll see the figures at the bottom of each of those towers. A similar poll showed just 51% support for a ban and 28% opposition. So you can see that support for a ban has grown. The NHS in the UK now states that puberty blockers are not available to children and young people for gender incongruence or gender dysphoria because there is not enough evidence of safety and clinical effectiveness. And recent comparisons have found that the prescription of puberty blockers here in New Zealand is more than 10 times as frequent than in the UK per head of population. In July 2022, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA in the US, issued a warning label about the risk of puberty blockers after 6 minors aged 5 to 12 experienced severe symptoms. The minors, they were all biologically female, suffered from symptoms of tumour-like masses in the brain, including visual disturbances, headache or vomiting, swelling of the optic nerve, increased blood pressure, and eye paralysis. Yeah, doesn't sound too good, does it? Now, that's been our argument all along. Just as we would deal with anorexia nervosa, where a girl may think she's severely overweight when she's actually dangerously skinny and malnourished, we heal the mind, not cut and chemicalise the body. And the Cass review, which we've discussed a lot recently, said, quote, the reality is that we have no good evidence on the long-term outcomes of interventions to manage gender-related distress. The evidence we do have for gender medicine is built on shaky foundations. And it also said that young people facing gender-related distress had no significantly different levels of suicide risk to other young people with similar levels of complex presentations, and there was no evidence that gender-affirming treatment reduces suicide risk. Now, what about the RSE program in school? Well, we asked about that as well. And only 15% agree that primary age children should be taught they can choose their gender and that it can be changed through hormone treatment and surgery if they want it to be, while 2 out of 3, 69%, say they shouldn't. Opposition to gender ideology has grown significantly. You'll see the figures there at the bottom of each of those towers. From a similar poll we did in 2019, where only 54% said that children should not be taught this, and 35% said they should. However, there was a split over whether sex ed should be in schools at all. We found that 44% supported no sexual issues of teaching sex ed at primary school, and 40% opposed stopping that. So the difference is not statistically different and suggests that age appropriateness is the key. Now, the poll also asked, do you think taxpayers should fund surgery or hormone treatments for adults who wish to change their gender? Only 16% of respondents support taxpayers funding gender change surgery or hormone treatments, with 68% opposed. Interestingly, Labor's budget in 2022, when they were government, included an additional $2.2 million for gender-affirming care and $2.5 million to train GPs in advising trans youth. And they'd previously pledged $3 million over 4 years in their 2019 budget. Now, you can read the full poll results on our website, Family First NZ, but you'll note this is not the first time that we've commissioned polling on these issues, which is why we've been able to notice the trend towards rejecting this ideology as time has progressed and the evidence has come in. The general public are seeing the harms and confusion of this ideology on our children. So here's some other previous ones that we did. In sports, a 2023 poll last year found that just 13% of respondents agree that boys who identify as girls be allowed automatic right of access to girls' sports teams such as netball or girls' rugby or football and vice versa. And once again, that has dropped significantly from 39% support in a similar poll in 2018, and 68% disagree. Look at that big tower there, 68% disagree. Previously, it was just 39% in 2018, so opposition has grown significantly. A poll in 2021 found that only 22% of respondents think boys who identify as girls should be allowed automatic access to girls' toilets and changing rooms. 61%, almost 2 in 3 people, disagree. And once again, much stronger opposition than in a similar poll in 2019 that found it was 46% versus 36%. That biological sex should trump gender identity. So the opposition has grown significantly. In a 2022 poll, respondents were asked, the Ministry of Education tells teachers that schools do not have to disclose to parents that their children is identifying as transgender in the class and using a different name and preferred pronoun. Would you support a law requiring schools to notify parents if their child is identifying as transgender in class? And a majority, 55%, would support a parental notification law. Only 29% opposed, a further 16% were unsure or refused to say. And one more, a nationwide poll last year found significant opposition to a decision which resulted in a teacher losing his teaching licence for refusing to recognise a student's gender identity and using the student's preferred pronouns. Only 16% of respondents thought the teachers should lose their teaching licence for misgendering a trans student, 65% opposed. You know, it seems pretty clear that the politicians have the weight of public support to correct this confusing and harmful ideology and to protect our children and to acknowledge the truth of biology. It's time we put first do no harm medicine and credible research ahead of ideology and an agenda to push gender fluidity indoctrination. It's time we had watchful waiting, therapy and healing of the mind rather than chemicals, castration and confusion. The real question is, why won't the politicians represent the views of the public?